All right, let's return now to the debate over the drought that's been going on and on and on, both the drought, and of course, and the debate itself. Is the government going to do more? Can it do more? I'm joined now by Barnaby Joyce, the former Nationals leader, former drought envoy as well. Thanks very much for your time. What do you think? Is there a case for the government to do more than it is?
I think one more former and I'd be out of here.
But still a member for New England.
Look, yes, it is. I think we've taken the ball ahead. We've made substantial changes. They've cost substantial amounts of money, but there's always more you can do. And I think that some of the issues that we have to look at is how local communities can have more of a say in the direction of concerns for their area. I think there's something we could investigate in that space.
Like what?
Well, look at a very rudimentary level without putting much meat on the bone whatsoever. We have a thing called the Small Community Grants Program, where money is allocated, only $150,000, and this would need to be a lot more than that, to the local member. But the local member then employs or has a committee, and that committee works out, what are good causes that are fit for purpose to get, grants to do certain things. And during the drought, you have issues such as fodder. I think that's been brought to the fore. But you might also have issues such as school fees. You might have issues such as a major employer in the area needing some form of assistance because of duress that's been placed on it by the drought. And I think that you have a more agile form if you had a sort of local committee in an area that had the capacity to deliberate over that, and also, to be quite frank, would remove the politics out of it, because we could say, well, that's what your committee decided. That's where they believe that the assistance needed to head towards. And
you could tailor the support for what that particular region needs rather than a blanket approach.
Well, yeah, maybe you'd have a sort of voucher type system, and that committee, whether it's stock and station agent or the mayor or the rural financial counsellor or people who were respected and prominent and understood the concerns, and also stop people ripping the system off, because they wouldn't turn up. Yeah, the person who knew there.
I guess one of the concerns with any regional grants programs are that they become pork barrelling exercises if the local member can simply dole out the cash.
Well, the local member couldn't, because you'd have a committee of people around them, and you'd have a form of transparency. And the local member doesn't want to be seen as the person picking the winners, because precisely that someone will think there's some sort of nefarious purpose behind it. But that's just...
So you'd have some local council representation.
Yeah, maybe just the mayor, and and just not make it too big, but they could sort of determine... See, for an area, it might be, well, this abattoir is going to close down unless we work out some mechanism to alleviate it of some payment, or it might be someone who's got no stock on their place and say, we might help them out with a bit of their rates. And if you did it on a voucher system where they had a budget, they don't have to spend it all. They can spend some, and of course you'd say, mate, as soon as it rains, it's over.
But again, if we're talking about Commonwealth taxpayers' money, should the local mayor be given that much authority to dole it out?
Even they wouldn't have that much authority. It'd be a committee. And this is just a rudimentary thing. I just think that the biggest problem you have, Susie, is you go out there and say, look, if you were the boss, if I waved the magic wand and you were a tyrant with a terminal disease for a week, and all you could do was do anything you wanted with the drought, what would you do? And people go, I don't quite know, to be honest. And they all know they need help, but they can't quite put their finger on exactly what it is. So...
Well, some of them can. Some of them say we desperately need fodder, we desperately need...
OK, well, this would give you the capacity to say, if that's in the eyes of your peers, if you need it, then there can be a proper assessment done of it. And seeing this as a drought for the local community gives the local community the capacity to do it. Now, once more, I'm just... Yeah. In this job, you've got to come up with process. And the other thing that people, I think we should look at is obviously insurance, to give people more resilience into the future. But it's going to be a hard ask, because you're going to have a wide pool of people engaged with that.
Yeah, I was going to... How wide would that pool be at the moment? How many farmers would have that sort of, what are we talking, multi-factor crisis insurance?
Well, it's more simple than that. It has to be wide enough that the insurer makes money out of doing it. Otherwise, the insurer won't.
Correct.
Simple business principles. And farmers are pretty clever, and the ones who don't think they need insurance don't insure, and the ones who do. But house insurance works because everybody insures their house. And, there has to be that sort of...
What would the role for government be to help that along?
Well, we've been in that space before, and we did it through the white paper, and the white paper basically paid for the business plan.
Right.
Or subsidised the business plan so that people could have an assessment on their place, which they needed to take forward to the insurer. I think it was Lativis at that stage to do the assessment of how much your premium was going to be.
Okay, so the government could get back into that.
Well, that's for the minister to decide. But I think I know that the National Party, what the National Party is going to be doing, is pushing forward with this program. I know the National Party...
With both of these ideas?
Well, I think that the National Party is very much... I mean, we had a meeting this morning and we made sure that people clearly understand in regional areas that we are not blind to the issues. We have not sat on our hands, that we are going to be working as a National Party assiduously to try and make sure that we push the agenda forward.
So the party is doing this within the coalition, urging this next step?
You know, the National Party is the National Party, the Liberal Party is the Liberal Party, and the National Party will be developing, you know, what we believe Michael and Bridget and David and Matt should be sort of taking into the cabinet room and driving forward. And we absolutely...
And this is what they're going to do? Well,
it is our job to make sure we look after our people in the National Party, and the people in the regional areas will know that we are definitely going to bat for them. And you know, we have, as part of the coalition, delivered. You can see that in the dams. The dams is a huge announcement, and you know, there's more to do. And we've been an absolutely.
But on these new ideas that the National Party is going to be pushing, I know you're saying they're not developed to the point of putting dollars around them, but you would be talking about something substantial.
Well, you know, the droughts are substantial, and this drought is the worst in some areas. And you know, your alternative is to say we've done enough. That's where it finishes, and no one's suggesting that. I think what the Labor Party's got to do is, as the National Party is doing, is developing policy. The Labor Party comments, but they don't actually develop. They never actually come forward and said this is their policy as to what they would do.
In terms of this, though, can I ask, what do you reckon about maintaining the surplus? How important is that compared to some of these ideas?
Well, you know, it's a case that if you've got due diligence over any program, then it's not just throwing a checkbook at it. It's, you know, and therefore you have those skill sets that are involved in being discerning about what...
But should we be prepared to blow the surplus on this?
Well, I don't think you could. You know, I think we're going to have a strong surplus in multiple billions, and I couldn't see this program costing more.
And someone who knows how department works, how you run, you know, been the minister before, why can't a department federally look at each community and say they need...
I just think it's too clumsy. And if you go back to the Small Community Grants program, and Mark Colton, member of Parks, had a strong role in developing that, is that I can't tell you... That's a very small... It's up to $20,000, but using it as parallel, I can't tell you which CWA needs to fix their veranda.
And the department can't work that out?
And the department's not going to be able to do that, and they're going to be able to tell you which barbecue needs to be fixed in a local area, or who needs a defibrillator at their sports ground. But the local community members do. They understand it. And it's amazing that they can come to a consensus opinion within your office about, you know, what is the most reasonable place for the budget, the very, very small budget you have, to be spent. And I think this is a similar type of...
Can I ask you about, the government's already got $100 million going out to councils, $1 million each to spend on helping with the drought. And we know one council a couple of weeks ago had a problem with saying that they didn't actually need it. But anyway, look, the Guardian's looked at how some of this money is being spent. A lot of it, in fairness, is being spent well.
Yeah.
But there are examples like the Winton Council in Queensland spent $820,000 on a music festival. Which one was it? This one.
Toilet one.
There's one on a new toilet at the cemetery. Yeah. There's one that has spent some money on a virtual gym. This is Winton as well. Yeah, that include Zumba classes via video link.
Well, who are we to comment on Zumba classes? And there are a lot of people in cemeteries who, from time to time, need to go to the toilet. Right. No, but really, what the purpose of it is to employ local skill sets. For instance, at Walker, we put a new pavilion, a new sort of central spot, kitchen, bar at the Walker Showgrounds. And you say, well, what's the purpose of that? Because it employed the local electrician, it employed the local plumber, employed the local brickie.
I mean, I'm sure that's right, and I'm sure these projects might be worthwhile, but do you recken farmers who are struggling to keep their cattle alive would say,
so important.
Why are you spending money on the Zumba class?
Yeah, well, you know, that's sort of the colour, but you'd have to drill into it and see what are the other issues that was really stimulating. This is a big issue. Droughts are not just about farmers. They're not just about farmers. They're about the hairdresser in town and the electrician in town and the plumber in town. The reason building dams is really good is because people say, oh, it hasn't rained. Of course it hasn't rained. It's a drought. But all the contractors, the aggregate, the earthworks, the concrete, the electricians, the plumbers, the labour, to build them stimulates the local economy. And these $1 million grants are really, in the scheme of things, small, but they allow us to keep crucial skill sets in the community. And some of these other things are about, if people are really down in the chops, to try and get them the hell out of their house and mixing with other people. And that's why, if there's a, I don't know, a Zumba class, really it wouldn't matter if it's a sausage sizzle. Just get out of your house and talk to other people for once.
Final one, Joel Fitzgibbon reckons it's time for a war cabinet on the drought. Good idea, and would you like to be on it?
Well, Joel would say that. Joel, the first thing's got to come forward with his own drought policy. He's got to sit in this room and say, this is what the Labor Party would do. Not, what's the point of him turning up to any cabinet if he hasn't got any ideas?
Barnaby Joyce, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.